So now we saw what is happening in another sector that has actually not been in the forefront maybe of sustainability in history, but is very quickly making progress right now. Now we will go back to the gambling sector. So yes. The floor is yours, and I think your pictures are there too. So
I'm sorry that Peter left, because I was going to say that I saw a credibility ranking in the newspapers the other day. I'm a lawyer, and usually it's like doctors up here and lawyers down here. But now we're together with the bankers, so that's great. What I want to talk today is about attitude and perception. We had already had some excellent speeches about this topic. I think there's been a lot of talk about Åland and Sweden. So I want to turn to speak about Denmark. But I think what we have seen is what is coming in Sweden. And even though Denmark and Sweden is in very different places right now, we also actually in the same spot, perception-wise. So yes, what has changed? What can we learn from Denmark? And has the attitude shifted in any direction? So most of you would know that there was a gambling reform in 2012 in Denmark, where finally we broke the monopoly and we went for a new licensing system for online betting and online casino. That was about time, I have to say. It was exactly like it is in Sweden now. There was gambling advertisement everywhere. There was a big grey market. And I think it was fair to say that there was no control over the market. In 2006, though, so going back before it all went on, there was a prevalence study in Denmark, and it showed actually very little gambling addiction in Denmark in comparison with other Scandinavian countries such as Norway and Sweden. The problem was that there was never any follow-up on this gambling addiction study. So when we came to 2009, 2010, we had this explosion in gambling in Denmark, unregulated gambling. The authorities couldn't do anything. It was impossible to do anything about the gambling advertising that were coming from UK-based TV channels, and it was the belief that had affected gambling addiction, or at least that was what the treatment centers or the researchers said. And they also said that we don't have any funding. We don't have enough funding, so you need to do something about it. You have to get control of the market, and you need to allocate more funding for the market. At the same time, the state lottery was not performing really well. The profit from the lotteries was going down. The lottery was Danske Spil was losing market shares on betting. So those beneficiaries of good causes, they were not happy either. So they were also calling for changes. And then there were finally the media, especially the TV media, who was not able to benefit from the offshore operators. They said, "But let's change it." So we did. And in 2010 there was a political agreement, and 2010 the law was adopted. Then it took a long time because of some other problems, but in January 2012 the new market started. And this is a graphic depiction of how it went. You'll see here that this is the betting market. This is the online casino market. And I'll turn to hard facts instead here. Just so you know that there's roughly 5.5 million people in Denmark. The total market in 2016 was 1.2 billion euros. So that's if you include everything, lotteries and betting and online casino. But if you just focus on the new market, so the betting and online casino market, you'll see massive growth. So from 2011, so before the market regulation, there was approximately Danske Spil was earning 102 million GGR on their betting product, and today it's 509 million euros. So that's a market growth of 400%. That of course includes a lot of the gambling that was already there, so channelization. But even within the market, there's been organic growth. You see that from 2012 to 2016, there's been 82% growth in the market. Danske Spil was allowed to operate side by side with the new operators, and it's fair to say, so I should acknowledge that they've done really well. They were able to transform their business into a new market. They did that really well, but they also had major benefits. They were allowed to utilize their database, which consisted of lottery customers but also betting customers. They were allowed to cross-sell between them. They were allowed to use the same platform and the same marketing platform. So that earned them a market share of 59% of the new market, they were very unhappy, the rest of the operators. The market share is decreased now to 48%, and it will decrease more because this year Danske Spil was told to split everything. So they're not allowed to market everything together anymore. They have to share, they have to split the wallet, so lottery customers will not be able to spend that money on betting and online casino anymore. The question I get most often is, so financially, how did that impact the state or the state revenue? And that is not easy to find that number because the Danish state doesn't want to announce it for some reason. I don't know why. But with help of former employees, I managed to figure out that the growth in tax revenue from the market is approximately now 100 million euros per year. So, and that includes corporate taxation and dividend and regular taxation. So that's a lot of money for the state. So I don't think there's any doubt that financially this has been a major success for the Danish society. The funds for research and treatment was also increased. So 10 million owners increase, so like 4 million euros. So the total is 4 million euros in 2016. So if you're just looking at the numbers, this is a huge success, and for the players were happy. So this is leading up to now. All the stakeholders were happy. The players were happy. They got new products. They got the operators that they used to bet on. There's major channelization, around 90% now. So there's very, very little illegal gambling, and it's a viable market. It's a profitable business. The operators are happy. The gambling researchers got the money that they wanted, so they were happy until now, at least. We talked about it. The Danish government was happy, and the media were happy. But suddenly, and you don't know when, but suddenly you feel like something is changing. The attitude is changing. It used to be only positive stories in the media. So when the market opened in 2012 for the next years, it was all positive stories. It was all stories about winners and in the new products, how fascinating it is, and never really any bad stories. But this has changed completely. And it came at the same time as a new prevalence study was made. And unfortunately, this prevalence study was made only 10 years after the last one. So it's really, really difficult to make any comparisons. There's so much that has happened between 2006 and 2016. But I think it came as a surprise, actually, because the gambling addiction researchers had pushed for such a study for a long time, because they said there must be an increase, there must be a major increase of gambling addicts in Denmark. We see it in our clinics. We see people coming in. There's so much marketing. We just need this study. And what happened was that when the study came, it really didn't show much change. It's roughly the same level as before, as in 2006. And for the industry, this was good news. I mean, we're not ignoring that there are still gambling addicts. We still have the same challenges as before, but it had not increased. But for some reason, this was not the outcome. This was not the message that was given. The message that was given from those who had been involved in this study was, there are major problems. You have to do something about it. And for some reason, the media went along with the story and said, yeah, but there are major problems. We have to do something about it. And it's very difficult as an industry to stop this negative spiral, because we said, but this is not the truth. Have you looked at the numbers? It's the same as 10 years ago. There has not been an increase. But I think you have to put it into the context that we discussed earlier. The media is much more negative, but the population in general, and I think that was what Per Bende talked about, is that there's just much more negative perception of the gambling industry as such. And even though I don't think the negative perception of the industry is as bad in Denmark as it is in Sweden, there is a difference because all the operators in Denmark are regulated now. So there's this confidence that if you bet at an operator, it's being controlled by public authorities, and then that makes a difference. So there is a better perception, but there is also the perception that it's too much. There's too much gambling now. There's too much advertising. I'm fed up with it. So very much the same that we see in Sweden. So when there is something, when an operator makes an error or they're non-compliant, it's in the newspaper the next day, and they will get massive negative PR from it. And that is what has happened recently to some of the bigger operators, so Danske Spil, Kindred, where they were found in breach of AML issues. So basically because they didn't check the sources of funds of their players, which they should have. They were fined, and one of the cases is now turned into a compensation case against that operator. And they will get more negative press from it, because should that player have all his money back. And if we go abroad, from Denmark and Sweden, I think we see in UK it's turning even worse. All of you have heard about all the stories that have been recently with 888, with operators who were using affiliates who were not really following what the affiliates were doing, and this has caused the government to restrict the gambling market in UK, and I absolutely see this happening in my own country as well. And we see, because of this pressure from the public, we see we see also that authorities feel like they're pressured to do something. So they look into the marketing, they look at the terms and conditions, they look at advertising campaigns, they look at limitation of players. A lot of things also creating bad will. And finally, because of all this pressure, the Ministry of Taxation has said, well, I'm going to invite all the political parties this autumn to discuss what we can do. And when he says what to do, it's about restricting the market, restricting advertising, and whatever. The researchers are really calling for some serious measures. So a ban on marketing is what they would really like, but probably not going to get. But maybe restrictions on when you can advertise, restriction on the use of bonuses, and they're also asking for deposit limits, mandatory deposit limits, which would hurt the market seriously. So this is the situation, and the question is, what can you do as an industry? I think we discussed it in the lunch break too. What can you do? You see in Sweden, you see operators are now doing various initiatives, so player protection tools and other measures to sort of ramp up your public reputation. But is that really the way to go? Self-regulation. I was never for self-regulation, because you end up in a situation where some operators do something, some other operators do something else, and some operators don't do anything. And that is not my that is not the way of regulating a market. I think you see a very bad example of it in UK, where the funding of responsible gambling is based upon voluntary contributions from operators, and every year they end short of the target because some operators didn't pay. That is not a great way to do it, but this is currently what we're discussing in my organization, because we're worried about what is going to happen. Will there be, if we leave it to the politicians to discuss, maybe there will be serious restrictions on the market. So maybe we should offer them something. Maybe we should figure out some way to improve the industry before they think of something else. So, as you see, even though the market is in a different situation in Denmark than in Sweden, we are actually very much in the same situation, attitude-wise or perception-wise. Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So you were for 12 years you've been a legal advisor to the Danish State Lottery. Is that correct?
The Danish State, the Gambling Authority.
Yes.
Yes.
And you've been as one of the initiators of this regulation in Denmark. So could you also be like the legal advisor and take the initiative to these new regulations that you think might be needed?
Yeah, but that's what we do as a trade association, because we try to counter things before they're happening. I mean, that's the whole reason why we have a trade association, to try to influence the stakeholders, the politicians, and try to avoid the worst scenarios. So that's why we want to engage with them now. But it's a very polarized debate, where we have some of the gambling addiction researchers, and they are as much lobbyists as we are, it's difficult to find the middle ground.
Yeah, but I can see the media logic also. If it increased from 0.3 to 0.4, that's actually an increase by 33%. So you can make huge headlines.
Yeah, well, you can spin it many ways.
Yeah. Comments, questions? Yes.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the marketing spend. Pre-regulation versus post-regulation.
Yeah. It's I don't have the exact the total numbers of marketing spend, but I think we talked about it before. So you have before the market regulation, you had a market where you couldn't market yourself in every channel of the media, so that gave some restrictions. But on the other hand, you had a lot of operators maybe paying minimal taxes in Gibraltar or Malta or Curacao, so they could spend a lot of their money on marketing. Today you have a regulated market, and you pay a lot of money to be in that market. You also pay a higher taxation, so the money that you can spend on marketing is less. But nevertheless, you have to continuously spend money in the market, because there are market entrants coming all the time, and you see with the new operators, they're simply the only way they can acquire customers is to spend or overspend for the first years, and that gives pressure in the market. So marketing is maybe not as high as before, and maybe not as high as in Sweden, but it's definitely high.
So when you look back on this reform, this regulatory reform, and you see the criticism that has come in the last years, would you say that you liberalized the market too much, or that it should have been more restricted from the beginning when you did this regulation reform?
No, the market is working like any other open market, which I think it should. But of course, it's the responsibility for the state to regulate what seems to work not properly. So I would hope that there would be a pragmatic solution to the. I mean, you have to acknowledge that it is too much now. It's people are fed up with marketing. I think that's fair. And I think it's also fair to say that this industry is still young. So maybe the initiatives like the Åland Bank is doing, maybe the industry is not being quick enough to pick up on such initiatives. But I'm hoping that we can find ways without completely eradicating marketing.
Yeah, maybe Sweden can learn something from the good and the bad side of what was done with you. So thank you very much. I also have now. It's also in the envelope. It's a gift of from Paf to the Baltic Sea, actually, and not to the speakers. But it's a sort of diploma about the gift to the Baltic Sea that they give. So thank you very much.